This is Dr. Tami Dean, and you are listening to the Equity Hour podcast. I am so excited to be here with you today. My goal is that as a listener, you leave with new ideas, resources, and actionable steps for your educational community. Let's explore how we can use our voices for equity and social justice today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Equity Hour with me, your host, Dr. Tami Dean. I am so excited to have Leroy Smith in the house with us today as my guest. Leroy, hello.
Hi, Dr. Tami. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, hanging in there. Spring is springing, which I love,
Yes, love spring.
Yeah.
Other than the allergies.
Oh, yes, the allergies can go back to where they are. But so everyone, Leroy is an education leader, a curriculum specialist, and an advocate dedicated to empowering students and the educators who serve them. His passion for education was shaped by his personal experiences of inequity, inspiring his lifelong commitment to ensuring all students, regardless of background or ability, have the opportunity to succeed. So exciting and so much in line with myself. I know we've talked a little bit about that, and really exciting. He does vocal music, and then in 2020 he founded the Realize Curriculum Solution, which provides curriculum design, professional development, and special education advocacy services. So he's worked with a ton of students, over 10,000 of them, and has partnered with Carnegie Learning. So welcome to the show, Leroy.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you for coming. I am so excited. I cannot wait to hear and learn more about all the work that you do. One, because selfishly, you and I are like kindred spirits in our journey, which always speaks to me. But let's talk about that journey, because that is one of the things I always want people to hear, how people got to this work and what they've done, because oftentimes, and I think in the current climate especially, it can feel like it's something we shouldn't be doing, or it's like a task versus a way of being or acting or moving in the world. So tell us a little bit about your equity journey, like what got you here, and what you do.
Sure. So my journey starts, I'm a Baltimore boy, as I like to say to people. I like steamed crabs, but I prefer crab cakes and crab soup. That's my preference for Baltimorean cuisine. But I was born and raised in Baltimore, still live here. On my home here, actually 2 blocks in my high school is where I live. So true Baltimore boy, and that kind of where my journey started. My maternal grandmother had a daycare in our house when I was around about 4 through 7 years old. And I got my start working with children at that age.
I just threw you right in the fire back in those days.
Yeah, back in the 90s, it's just like, just throw you into wolves. I guess it's still, millennials are still used to that, throw them into wolves kind of, I guess, lifestyle at some point.
Yes, well, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm definitely
Oh yeah, Gen Xers.
Yep.
Maybe it's Gen Z, I don't know, but depending on what they're going through in their family. But yeah, I was just kind of thrown in there, and since I was one of the oldest kids, and well, I was the oldest of my siblings and of all my brothers, and then I was the oldest of some of my cousins who were also being babysat by my grandmother and some of the kids in the neighborhood. And so at that point, I was already reading a little bit because I went to Head Start, and my great uncle, my maternal grandmother's brother, he was already reading to me a little bit, and I'd already picked up pretty quickly on some things. So I would read the kids' stories or books that I've already read a bunch of times at the time. I would help out with, getting them their bottles and changing their diapers and getting them ready for their parents to pick them up. So I got immersed with children at a very early age. I just turned 35 last week, so now I'm saying I'm going on 31 years of working with children, both formally and informally. I don't even want to use the words formally and informally, but both kind of unintentionally and intentionally, I would say that. So that's kind of where it started. And then as I grew up and went to Baltimore City public schools, I started to notice the difference between how my brothers who were younger than me were being treated.
Mm.
They had different diagnoses of speech um, delays and some diagnoses of ADHD and learning disabilities that were at play. And in addition to all that, growing up in a rough part of Baltimore during the 90s, during the height of the heroin, all
Oh.
that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And if you've ever seen the first three seasons of The Wire, I lived in pretty much all those neighborhoods. So there were no props. Our neighborhood was the backdrop. So that's where I grew up.
Mm.
There was violence and drugs, all kinds of stuff that were pervasive in the neighborhood. And at an early age, I kind of knew that things weren't right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew things weren't fair for people. So much so that when I was in kindergarten, I'm pretty sure you remember it was like a thing that everyone did back at that time for Gen Xers and in the 90s babies and millennials. It was what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, yes.
Question in kindergarten. And most people in the class are just like, I want to be a doctor or a baker or lawyer or something like that, or a wrestler for some of the boys in my class. But I was the only one that was just like, I want to be the mayor of Baltimore City. And my kindergarten teacher was like, why? And I said, because and I remember it kind of vaguely a little bit. But I remember because I saw my kindergarten teacher maybe a few years after that, by the time I was in fifth grade and getting ready to go to middle school, and she told me the story. And she said, I asked you why, and I pretty much was just like, well, I'm tired of seeing homeless people on my way to school. And I'm tired of people in my family going through what they're going through. It's not fair. Um, and she was just like, are you certain that you want to do this? And I was just like, I don't know. And so that was me in kindergarten. And then my third grade teacher, Miss Golfigan, she really kind of lit the flame of like being in the classroom and being in education. She said, if you want to give back, the greatest thing you can do in your community is to inspire the young minds of your community members and even the minds of people who are or older to think more critically about who they are, where they are, and what they want to do with their lives. And so that's kind of how my start happened, kind of just after
Yeah.
third grade. And then there were a series of events that led to me going to college and other things that led me into education because I just noticed that there was just so many things that were unfair. And I wanted to do something about it in a way that was meaningful to me.
Oh my gosh. I kudos to your teacher, right? Like I
Hmm.
keep thinking like inspire, serve, like
Hmm.
some of the greatest things you can do for your community, for your country, for your state, for
Hmm.
people
Hmm.
is to use your voice. And I
Hmm.
love that sometimes we think that young children don't have the capacity or
Hmm.
ability to
Hmm.
see injustice, but I actually think they're so much better at seeing it and
Hmm.
naming it
Hmm.
than we are as adults. Like it's almost like we train it out of them to see and notice it. And
Hmm.
everyone knows the story of the kids, right? Being like, well,
Hmm.
that's not fair. And the adults are
Hmm.
like, well, what is fair is not always equal,
hmm
which is true.
hmm
And
hmm
how does that actually get applied in systems and structures, right? Because if
hmm
a group has been historically marginalized, and what
hmm
is fair is not always equal means they may need extra support to help get them to the space where they're on equal
hmm
footing.
Yeah.
And that may be a different way to think about that phrase for some people, because I don't think they think about it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I've taught math for years, and I mean, one of the greatest lessons that you can teach students is about negative and positive integers.
Mm.
Is when you're already in debt, you need even more to get into the positive. So there's a lot more effort. And we talk about magnitude on the number line.
Yeah.
And like we talk to kids about like when you hear magnitude, most people think of earthquakes.
Yeah.
The larger the magnitude, the more the impact. It's the same thing when when you're on the negative side of things, the further you are away from equal opportunity or just any great opportunity, the more that you need, the higher the magnitude you need to get propelled forward. Because you're so much further behind, not because of anything that you did, it's just because of
Mhm.
the circumstances and the systems that are in place.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that way of thinking about it too, because that for people and how sometimes people get emotional talking around some of these
Mm-hmm.
processes or systems or what are really
Mm-hmm.
fact, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a way to think about it outside in a way that's a little bit more tangible, I think is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel like a personal attack. It just is
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, just really think about this. If this
Mm-hmm.
happens,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is the result of that. And then how do we
Mm-hmm.
mediate that?
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you had a calling, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
call it that, and a passion from a
Mm-hmm.
very young age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So do you feel like your trajectory because of that went kind of linear, or did you take the windy path more like me? Like where it's there, but like there's a trend line. Speaking of math, right? Look
Yeah.
at me.
Yeah.
There's a trend line, but
You
it
know, I think all of our lives are kind of similar to that. Like there's no straight line.
Mhm.
I think it's part of the human experience, to ground us and to, humble us and to help us have more compassion for others. I think it is anyone who has a straight line forward tends to be, in my perception, maybe their whole lives have been planned out for them by someone else.
Oh.
Um, and they have no agency. So, and those are often people who are privileged. So, because I've met some of those people when I went to college. I went to PWI, and some of these people had everything done for them. Their whole life was set out for them. I mean, they could have not really they could have went to any school they wanted to go to, and they still would have made more than most of us do because of their connections and their privilege. So their life was always in a straight line going up. I think that's why they have a hard time. Sometimes, some not all of them, but I think a good portion of people who are in that space have a hard time kind of relating to others because they don't experience the same downs that are natural in our experience as human beings. So to answer that question, I've kind of went a little up and down throughout my life. I started actually at first I was going to be I went from wanting to become the mayor of Baltimore City
Yes.
when I was a little kid to wanting to become a lawyer for the NAACP. Then changing from that to wanting to be a historian of Africana studies and things like that. Then to changing to being a musical performer as a vocalist. I thought I was going to travel the world and sing jazz and gospel and R&B and pop and opera and all that good stuff. Then from that, as I went into college, I was a music ed major, so I thought I was going to teach music. But the major was particularly challenging for me because there were so many changes in the program.
Mm.
And it was very challenging for me at the time as well because I was in that time at conservatory, I was the only black male vocalist that was in the entire conservatory. So I felt quite
Oh, wow.
isolated. And
Yeah.
there were some racial incidents on campus as well. So that mixed with the trauma I was still experiencing with my family and things that they were going through. There were a lot of ups and downs. Then I just shifted to be just music major, not knowing what I wanted to do with it. Did an internship, internship work study program through America Reads. Um, I think it's through AmeriCorps now. I'm not really sure if it's still through it, but did that at a school and loved it and taught multilingual students how to access English, as readers and writers and speakers. And then from there went into alternative teaching program and then kind of stuck with that for some time in education. And then the curriculum piece came, the advocacy piece came, the consultant piece came. So I think things kind of happen in their natural order with the
Yeah.
ups and downs. But I would say my future is um, still open. I think I'm trying to leave myself open to the future because I think where I am in my healing journey is that I can't predict the full future, and I'm trying to leave a little bit of space because if I don't create space in the future, I'm kind of locking myself out and other people out that I can serve. And so I'm trying to be more in that mindset as I, intentionally move forward.
Interested in learning more and getting a customized plan for you or your educators?
sign up for a free connection call with me, Dr. Tami, to discuss your personalized plan. The link is in the show notes.
That is really powerful, right? And I say that because you sound, I'm going to call you a high achiever, right? Because, and I'm gonna say that because to me, a high achiever is someone who continues to move forward through all of life's happening, right? Willing to change as change is necessary and being open to the new possibilities. I think people like to think of high achievers as just like, oh, you got the grades. I think there are so many ways to be a high achiever, and I don't want it to be that limiting, right? Because how powerful to be a person to say, okay, I am here and I'm feeling very strong in what I'm doing, and I know there's something that may be out there that I don't even know that I don't know yet that's going to come my way. So like opening your heart and your spirit to that possibility. And I just think that's really powerful. I think that's a really important part of connecting with people, doing social justice work. I personally have that sort of mantra, right? Like I've done 50,011 different things in the trajectory of my career, all really grounded in my purpose, which is right about people and equity and justice and all of these things just looking very different. But that open mindset had me do things that if you would have asked me when I was, the 18-year-old going to college, oh, you're gonna whatever one day, I would be like, first of all, I wouldn't have even been able to imagine we could see each other and we're not even in the same state. Like that didn't exist when I was 18. This makes me sound really old. I swear I'm not. But those kinds of things. So I think that's also a great mindset when engaging with people that may have a different perspective or viewpoint than you, like moving past the bias, the assumption, and like you're preordained, like this is where this is going to end in this conversation can help us better learn and understand from each other. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that's true. That's also part of my healing journey. I was actually looking at some of I look at my reflection journals here or there just to see like where I was not that long ago and where I am. And one of the things I noticed is that although I experienced quite a bit of trauma just because of the circumstances of where I grew up and the systems that influenced that or caused that or had some hand in that, I actually had quite a bit of like I was both a caretaker at too young of an age to not enjoy the beauty of childhood, but at the same time I was also, because of the family structure, there was a lot of loose structure for me to create my own way. So I think as I've gotten older, I realized that it's just kind of been a part of my nurture, kind of inadvertently by my family, and also part of my nature to just kind of find my own way. And as I've done that, I've learned that I have to create space for other people as they're finding their own ways. So I think that's why, typically when I speak to people, I say I can sit down with even someone who doesn't like me or hate me because I'm open to hear where their heart is and where it was. Because I think sometimes the greatest thing that diminishes our humanity is just not understanding, like I said, that up and downs, the natural parts of life. And I don't know what down someone went through that created whatever they feel or whatever they believe. I don't know what up they experienced that may have created that either. I just know how I show up in the world and I try my best to understand other people. So I think having that openness allows us to actually be in community and grow. Like I'm trying to think of like all the gardeners out there. It's gardening season. If you don't like make enough space in your soil for all the things you're growing, things will start growing up on top of each other and competing for space, and they'll be in conflict. So there, I think even gardeners know kind of almost like through, how do you say, muscle memory, that can't crowd everything. There has to be a level of openness just for things to grow. So I think that's the space I'm in now, and I'm trying to continue that path.
Yeah. Yeah, the plants need a space to breathe and have
Mm-hmm.
airflow, right, to be
Yeah.
their most productive.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great analogy, right? Because we as humans also, right, need space and air to breathe and room
Mm-hmm.
to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. So, okay, so you did a bunch of different things. You said you moved into
Mm-hmm.
consulting, and so
Mm-hmm.
now you have founded Realized Curriculum Solutions.
That's
You've worked
correct.
with a ton of students. So, I tell everyone a little bit more about that. What is it you do?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you work with?
Sure. So, Realized Curriculum Solutions, we started, I would say unofficially, unofficially, actually, my first year teaching by myself, without me even knowing that that was going to turn into anything, really. I would say that's back in the 2012, 2013 school year, around that time. Um, More so 2013, 2014, going around that time after my residency with what is it, City Teaching Alliance. They used to be called Urban Teachers back in the day.
Okay.
So I used to tutor some of my students on the weekends at the libraries or sometimes tutor them during the summer. And at the time I was really didn't know what to call my company. So I was just like, Mr. Smith tutoring, I didn't say, I was like, meet me at the library on Saturday between 11 and 1. And I worked with a lot of my families at the time. And so it kind of started unofficially there because once again, as a teacher in the classroom, I realized that so many of our students needed more
Yeah.
from a variety of different backgrounds. And then years kind of went by. I kind of, here or there, dabbled here, tutoring there. It all started off with tutoring, honestly. And then I kind of took a break from it for maybe about 3 years, 3 or 4 years. Um, and then the pandemic hits.
Yes.
And we're stuck at home, and people kept calling me, like former families, former students that were now in high school, getting ready for college, who had IEPs, former colleagues, former supervisors of like, how do we support students with IEPs? How do we support culturally and linguistically diverse students who are struggling during global pandemic? And I was like, why are these people calling me?
Because
I
you
was
knew
just
something. You knew
Well,
something.
I mean, that was at a different point where I feel like my self-esteem was really, really strange. Like, I felt like I knew I was good at getting good results with students, but I didn't think that anyone else noticed other than me. And so I was just like, oh, people are calling me. I was like, this is okay, this is a lot. And so one of my former parents of a student I had at a previous school had asked, well, Mrs. Smith, how do I pay you for helping me with this? And I was like, I mean, you could just pay me. She's like, do you have a company? And I was like, no. And she's like, well, you should start a business. And I was like, why? And she's just like, so I told you this is the natural ebb and flows of life. I was like, why? I was like, and she said, well, it's because you're really good at what you do, and I think a lot of people need what you provide. And I was like, okay. And I thought back to an example we did like in a the school year before, well, 2 years school years before the pandemic, we did this example with our first graders, a mini unit on entrepreneurship, and they were coming up with business ideas and business names. And one of my students, Mari at the time, first grader, he said to me, Mr. Smith, you know what I realized? You are very good at working with kids that look just like me. Little black boy with an IEP. And I remember that touched my heart because it's one of the quotes and one of the students I remember like it was yesterday, even though it was a few years ago. And once the pandemic hit, when he said, I realized that you work well with kids that look like me, I just took that name realized from that statement. So, I'm really expressed gratitude to him. I don't know where he is now. I'm sure he's in high school now and probably we're at 10th grade. It feels like, ugh, feel old. Ninth or 10th grade,
That's the worst
possibly.
part, right? You're like,
I
oh, that
know.
student is now 30. Oh,
I know.
whoa.
I know. So yes, I named my company Realize Solutions, and it was also an awakening for me of like realizing my own worth as a human being beyond just doing the work, but actually just caring about others and just showing up for people the best way I know how to. Um, and so then it kind of transitioned into advocacy work. A lot of people then started flooding like, how do we get help for our kids? They need an IEP, they need evaluations, they need this. And then shortly after that, it was kind of like that, like you said, bouncing around thing. Tutoring came back into space because a lot of the people who I was advocating for also wanted me to tutor their kid as well because they wanted to make sure that they can catch up in their IEP goals and their
Yeah.
performance in school. And then as time went on, people who were former colleagues and supervisors were just like, hey, we've known that you've done a lot of curriculum work over the summers for a school district. We need you to help us with PD and curriculum. So then I got into PD and curriculum workshops. And so that's kind of where we are now, and actually is more so in the PD workshop space for educators, education leaders, and families. So we partner with educational organizations to help them both develop and adapt and implement curriculum resources for neurodivergent students of color. And so that's what we do now. And it's been great. I mean, I had to revise my website because the 10,000 students was in the past when I made the website.
Okay.
One of my clients, the Center for Civic Education, through some of the work I did with them on their We the People project with teachers a few years ago back in LA, the curriculum that they have implemented has touched over 1 million students in the country.
Oh, that's so cool.
So when they told me that recently, I was kind of floored. I never thought, I mean, I didn't even think I was going to be an entrepreneur, never thought that. Didn't think I was going to be a homeowner. Didn't think I
Well,
was
you
going to go
thought
to
you were going to be the
college.
mayor of Baltimore City. So,
Well, I don't know if I want that at all because that's just too much. It's too much work. Too much work. I feel like my calling is working with people who are in education and working with people who care for children.
yeah.
But yeah, stumbled into, well, my girlfriend says it's different. You didn't stumble into things. The world just kind of catapulted you in that way because I didn't think I was going to go to college. Dr. Tammy, I mean, I grew up in a rough neighborhood where gun violence was an issue. I didn't
Mhm.
even think I was going to live. It was a personal goal of mine at the time just to live past 18 because I
Yeah.
went to too many funerals for too many people in my family, seen too many people go to jail, and I just thought I didn't want to go to jail. I didn't want to, die young. That was real for me at the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't think I was going to go to college until teachers pushed me. I didn't think I was going to become a homeowner until people pushed me. I didn't think I was going to be an entrepreneur until people pushed me. So I'm learning that um, I have to kind of lean into the fact that there are people who see things in me that I don't see for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do what's right by myself, but also right by them because they've invested time, energy, and money to ensure that my company supports as many children throughout this country as we possibly can so that they can see themselves reflected in their curriculum, that they can feel like they have the skills necessary to do something about their now, not their future, but their now, because their now is we're living through stuff now. And so
All the time, every
yeah.
day. Yes. Yes.
So
Like,
yeah.
it's that phrase, like, tomorrow can't wait.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's like a really powerful statement in what you said, right? People can see things in you that you couldn't see in yourself. And I
Mm-hmm.
think just as an educator, and as a human, I think it's important that we
Mm-hmm.
share those things
Yeah.
with people
Yeah.
because you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, um, it's so funny. I told you you were kindred spirits.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I love that your name of your company has a story.
Mm-hmm.
My company name also has a story because nothing about this name says equity work. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the story is, I believe in the power of story, just first
Mm-hmm.
of all,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I do this podcast. I love the podcast because I think people relate to other humans. We've historically always related to each other
Mm-hmm.
via
Mm-hmm.
story and
Mm-hmm.
experience and
Correct.
seeing and hearing other people do that. And you're like, oh, maybe I could do that
Mm-hmm.
too. I too had other people, like, I've done all kinds of things. And they're like, you should just do it. Just start your own
Mm-hmm.
company, right? And I love that you had confirmation along the
Mm-hmm.
way, right?
Mm-hmm.
In ways that you weren't expecting. You're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
What? Okay. Like, and then this happens. And it's
Mm-hmm.
those, I don't know, for me, those little nuggets are what keep you going
Mm-hmm.
in figuring out where the next door opens or the
Mm-hmm.
next relationship
Mm-hmm.
or connection you're
Mm-hmm.
going to make.
Mm-hmm.
Um I love that about this work. I love that about people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of crazy in the world. And I think
Yeah.
social media and our
Mm-hmm.
current cycle has made it seem, how do I want to say this? Like everything is bad.
Mm-hmm.
I actually still believe in my heart that there are more people that want good and are trying
Mm-hmm.
to do things right by other people and
Mm-hmm.
want to care and support for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope my goal is like, how do you use your voice? I want everyone to find a way to use their voice in a way that's unique for them, that helps
Mm-hmm.
support this collective humanity we have.
That's part of the work that we do is when we're designing lessons or unit plans or assessments or rubrics, we're thinking about learning opportunities for children who typically have been cast aside by society or given up on. I mean, students who have, who are neurodivergent or who have disabilities who are also students of color.
Yeah.
Like, this is like the combination of like the most forgotten in our society. When you look at unemployment rates, it's not just people of color who are historically more marginalized in
Mhm.
unemployment. It's people of color who have a disability status that are like really feeling it right now and have been feeling it for such a long time. Um, and so we try to create opportunities where people see that we have been resisting from day one. It is a part of human nature to resist any negativity that comes your way. And that's the beauty of our experience. I think I was just listening to a podcast maybe about an hour before I got on with you about all of the untold, undocumented rebellions that happened for enslaved Africans here in the US that
Mhm.
are not mentioned in almost any history book unless you go to the collegiate level to look a little deeper.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. It's the same thing for social media, that the algorithms are planned in a way that we kind of feel disempowered, that we feel like things are worse than what they actually are. I'm in the firm belief that things have historically, because we're humans and we're not perfect, things have always had a level of crazy and always had a level of hope at the same time. I think we're just the current generation of human beings that are experiencing part of what is deeply human, the good and the
Yeah.
bad and the ugly. And I think it's our turn this time to experience what does it mean to resist against the ugly and the bad in the world, whatever that might be, and how do we cultivate, my girlfriend said, she's like, I don't have the energy to fight all the bad, but I do have energy to cultivate the good. And I'm going to cultivate the good
Mm.
so that our next generation that comes up behind us, when they go through the human experience of the good, the bad, and the ugly, they know what good feels like. They know what it looks like and sounds like, and they're willing to do it because it's been done for them. And so that's kind of the space I'm also in too. It's just like, as much as I can, I want to cultivate the good so people can realize that there is a level of strength and power that we do have in our noun. Whether
Yeah.
you're a fifth grade student who is reading 2 years below grade level in DC or Baltimore, wherever in the country, you still have just as much power as the person who goes to the private school, with all the money and all the fame and all the glory. You have power, but we have to find ways to get you to tap into it. That
Yeah.
their power is whatever their power is. It might make you feel small, but you're never small. You're always bigger than what you think you are. And that's something my teachers instilled in me at a young age. And also family members is just that the world is as big as we believe it is. And we are as big as we believe we are. And if we see ourselves as small, we're going to see everyone around us as small-minded people. I remember my fifth grade teacher said that. If you see yourself as small, you're going to project that upon other people, and they're going to see themselves as small. And then now you have a small-minded conversation. But if you see the other person as big and full, and you see yourself as big as full, you can have a big and full conversation and engage in a way that's more nuanced. So that's what we do. We want people to have the tough conversations. We want the children to say, guess what? My community may not be all the things I want it to be, but I have a role in this to do
Mhm.
something about it for myself and for others. And I can start today. I don't have to wait until I'm an adult. I don't have to wait until
Yeah.
I'm of the legal age to vote. I can start now in my own small ways of being in service to myself and others.
Yeah. Whew. Okay. Amen. Amen. Okay, I want to ask this because I
Sure.
believe in all of those. I believe that. And I think there are a lot of people that believe that.
Hmm.
So I have two questions really.
Sure.
One, kind of thinking around the current climate
Hmm.
and the pushback
Hmm.
around servicing,
Hmm.
students with disabilities,
Hmm.
around,
Hmm.
that culturally responsive
Hmm.
um education needs to
Hmm.
go away. This idea that we have to scrub
Hmm.
certain words.
Hmm.
One, I'm just curious how and if that's affected what you and your organization do at all. And then two, what's your kind of best suggestion for people
Hmm.
looking to make that difference in
Hmm.
this climate?
Hmm. Um, right now it's somewhat affected my work, both in, I would say, a unique way. I think it's made me think differently about how people approach this topic. I think when people hear words like equity or whatever else, other words they might hear in the litany of, I say, the lexicon of doing right by people,
Yeah.
I think people hear those things and it means different things to different people or from different experiences. So it's made me become more strategic about how I speak about the work and what I do. I think people, there is a fear that persists at the societal level that when you do right by all people, the society then crumbles or that
Mm.
the society can't sustain itself because now the truths are out there and now the truths are not in deep opposition with what we have been raised or what we have been taught to believe. And I think because of the natural instinct of human beings to hold on to whatever they hold dear to their hearts is the reason why the resistance is so strong to the truths that are of all people here.
Mm.
So I think that's where some of that is. And I think also because some people just don't experience those things. If you've lived a life where you've never experienced these kind of struggles, you're probably not going to care as much. Not because, and it doesn't mean that you're heartless. It just
Yeah.
means that this is a foreign concept to you. And so I think for me, I'm approaching the work understanding that not everyone who has privilege or who does not have privilege in different ways is coming into this current time that we're in, seeing it coming in with a, malintent. Some people are coming in with it just out of sheer, like, I don't know what this is. I've never
Yeah.
experienced this. I can't, I'm not concerned about that, about kids who have disabilities not getting their services met because my kids don't have them. I'm not concerned about, you know, the various truths about people's experiences being taught in school because in my neighborhood, there are no other kids that look like my kids. So why should I be concerned about that? So I think that's a part of it. So I have to strategically understand that because of how we are, especially in this country, because of how we are still segregated throughout the country and how so many people live so far away from each other. I didn't realize how big the US was, but also how small at the same time. It's big enough that people can like live in the same state or and live a few towns over and not experience any cultural diversity,
Yeah.
which is shocking to me. But it's also small enough that we can experience a whole bunch of things at one time. So I think that's one. And two, I think um, what we can do about it is remind ourselves we are just the latest iteration of our species that are going through what we've always gone through. I think that makes me feel empowered because it makes me not think that this is a unique challenge. This is a challenge that is deeply embedded within our experience as human beings and our species is in our DNA. That some of us will do some very lewd and crazy things, and others of us will try to say, let's not do that and let's find some way to not make that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to put it out there like this is all genealogy, but I think it's in our experience that happens. I think reminding ourselves that we have a blueprint for people who have come along in the past and who are currently creating a new blueprint right now, for how to resist. I think culturally and musically, I think about one of my favorite genres to sing are spirituals.
Mm.
And it's the music of people who were oppressed on plantations, who were sold on the auction block, people who in the North were being hunted down by the KKK in New Hampshire and New York, even though they say that the KKK was only in the South.
Right.
It's the people who, left their families in the South seeking for a better life, going up north, not knowing what was going to happen when they went north, or not knowing what was going to happen when they moved west, and singing these spirituals that eventually became blues and R&B and gospel and jazz and some of the styles we enjoy, country music and all kinds of things today.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that is that our ancestors sang even when they were picking cotton, or indigo in our area, in Maryland. Like they weren't going to let someone else who said they had ownership over their bodies get the last word. They were going to get their
Mm.
last word, even if they were still going through the trauma that they experienced. It was even so that some of these plantation owners started to realize that that was an act of resistance, the dance, the ring shouts, the singing.
Yeah.
And they started to have these things called silent plantations where they didn't want you to talk at all. But then we found ways to be creative with our hairstyles and
Yes.
communicate with our hairstyles. And we found ways to be creative in the patches we wore in our clothes, and the foods that we ate, or when we had time to downtime, or whatever it may have been. So it just reminds me of that is that we are just going through yet another iteration. I mean, it's not the exact same thing that maybe
Yeah.
previous generations went through, but it is the human experience that we're going to come to grips with the evils and the goods of the world and everything that's in between. And I think reminding myself that there's always something we can do, even if it's just you having the thought, I don't like what's going on. Like starting there is something you can do. When I work and I coach some teachers, I said, in
Yeah.
this day and time, letting your kids know that their disabilities do not define them is a part of the resistance. Letting them know that there have been people who, my favorite example is Harriet Tubman, a woman who suffered from epilepsy. Could you imagine
Right.
the first woman to lead a regiment in the army in the United States to free hundreds of slaves on one day? In one day, let alone all the other hundreds she freed just by herself. You know,
Yeah.
I think about a woman who went through seizures who said, you know what? She was willing to go through that just to free her people. So I put it in the hands of everyone else, like I'm putting it in my own hands, is that the smallest and or biggest things that we can do is tell ourselves that we know that there are things that are wrong. We're going to do something about it. We're going to tell our children that there's always something you can do about it, even if it's just us going down to City Hall and asking questions, or going to the school board meeting and asking questions. Even if it's us asking our energy supplier, why are you overcharging me? Are you overcharging my neighbors? Talking to your neighbors, like, are you being overcharged? Are you being overcharged? Where is this
Hmm.
coming from? So, or getting together and having a community garden so we can feed ourselves so we don't have to worry about the food prices.
Yeah.
So little small things go a long way. Donating clothes, donating diapers, donating whatever you have that you don't need in excess, because we have a lot of excess in this country.
Oh, absolutely, we do.
Whatever we can do to help, whether it's you just had a bunch of kittens, you had a litter of kittens, and your neighbor next door is an elderly person who needs company. You're giving the kitten to that person because you want that person to have a therapy animal or have something to care for. So I think those are the small ways we can do things that make a huge difference. I think the enemy wants us to be disempowered and disenfranchised, and I'm not one to allow it to happen because of the life I've lived. I've seen down the barrel of a gun a few times. And the one thing that, my father instilled in me is when these things happen, your enemy wants you to run away and hide. And
Yeah,
this is not the
absolutely.
time for us to run away and hide. This is time for us to say, you know what? Stuff is hitting the fan. It's time for us to figure out what are whatever I can do to help myself and to help others, in the most genuine ways possible. And I think that's how we resist. And I think that's the thing that's going to get us through this iteration of what we're all going through as human beings.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Like, isn't the
Mm-hmm.
time to be silent? They do want us to be feel disempowered and
Mm-hmm.
disenfranchised. And I think all the things you said are so important, right? The resistance always finds a way. So whatever that can look like
Mm-hmm.
for you as an individual,
Mm-hmm.
um, to stand up for what is right for
Mm-hmm.
people and share
Mm-hmm.
that with other people, that just
Mm-hmm.
makes it better for the collective.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Yeah, I keep saying that. I'm like, now is not the time to be silent.
Mm-hmm.
Now is not the
Right.
time, right? Someone asked me, "Oh, are you gonna change the name of your podcast?" I was like, "Nope."
Mm-hmm.
Nope. I can be mindful. Like there are lots of ways to talk about
Yeah.
what it is we do, just like you were saying. But I'm not going to change the name,
Mm-hmm.
um, because this is what we're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, like I recently had someone say something about wanting to be on the podcast, but wanted doesn't want to use the word equity. I'm like, well, you probably can't be on my podcast because that's an
Mm-hmm.
actual title. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
bless your heart. But I think those are such wise words of wisdom, and I don't want to detract from that with whatever it is I'm about to say.
No,
But
no.
no, it was just so powerful for everyone to hear and to end on. And I think it's important for people to remember and lean on. And I think if you don't know some of those things, learn about some of these things so you
Mm-hmm.
can also feel you don't, because you don't know what you don't know. But if you
Yeah.
go and learn, I know you were talking about like slave revolts. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you read Dr. Rebecca Hall's book, Wake. It's about women involved in the slave revolts.
No, not yet. Is it my what do you call it? My cart.
You're
I'm
like
supposed to get it.
TBR, like your car. Okay,
It's
highly
in my
recommend.
cart. I'm gonna get it now because you're like the third person like in the past like 2 months, and I had a few books sitting in my cart. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get them
Okay,
by May.
you definitely need to do that. I'll have to message you. I can't remember which episode it was, but I talked with an educator who uses it with her students and like
Oh,
takes their
that's
perspective. It's so
cool.
so cool, and she has a
I
second book
love
coming
that.
out. We just heard, but
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
yes, it's so cool. I'll send it to you because some of the stuff
Yes,
that they did
please.
was amazing, and I think it would align a lot with what it
Yes.
is
Yeah,
you're
I would love
doing.
to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I know we're kind of coming to the end of our time, and I
Mhm.
know you just gave us like so many amazing nuggets, but is there like one piece of advice that you would want people to leave with around, wanting to engage with this work? What would you say with them?
I would say engaging engaging in work with equity starts with you and starts with you kind of like learning a lot more about yourself, and learning a lot more about the people that you love and learning about the people that are just in your community. I think that's the starting point. I think it's very hard to say, let's do a solution when you don't really know the people that you're doing
Mm,
that for. Often that's the thing I feel like people do. They propose solutions, but they never really talk to the people who the solution is for. And they don't really live among the people. They don't ask them questions. So I would say start with yourself. And you might learn along the way. There's some things that you need to learn. You might learn along the
mm,
way that there might be questions that you have. And I think often the work of equity, makes you more courageous. I think a lot of people already have a level of courage with them. And I think when you're in the work of making things fair for people, it gives you a level of courage that you can't get anywhere else. And it kind of pushes you to see yourself as not just a singular individual thing or entity, but that you are part of a connected piece of human history. That history is being made every day you wake up. History is being made every day that you ask a question
yes.
and that you support. So I think that's the piece I want people to walk away with is start with yourself. Ask yourself the tough questions. The one question I ask myself every day is, did the way I was raised impact how I see the world? And the answer to that is always yes.
Yes.
I see the world as my girlfriend, she's a psychologist, so she actually, she always makes fun of me for this. I see the world as kind of like in the words of Paulo, Paulo Freire and
Hmm.
Pedagogy of Press is that this world has people who are willing to break the chains of oppression, and there are some people who want the chains of oppression to be here.
Yes.
And so I'd say reflect upon yourself, because believe it or not, we might be in his words, we might be in a false reality where we think that we're actually producing solutions for people to break their chains. But if anything, we're exchanging their chains for a different kind of oppression without even knowing, because we're not investigating ourselves, and we're not being in community with others to really know exactly what they need to thrive. So that's why I say that, because I don't want you to go out and just think, oh, I'm just going to read a bunch of research papers and I'm going to have all the answers. I'm read all the books and have all the answers. I'm just going to go into whatever community and just do these things, and then all the people in that community are going to be grateful for it. No, just check yourself and check in with others and see what it is that they need. Because like I said, my neighbors on this block, I know one of my elderly neighbors, she likes getting plants. That's what she needs to feel good in her retirement. But another elderly neighbor next door, she loves all her little cats that run around. And that's something that she needs. And they live right next to each other, pretty much the same age. And there's older Black women in Baltimore in a mixed income community. And guess what? They approach what they need for healing two different ways.
Yeah.
So just checking in with people and checking in with yourself, I think, is the easiest thing to do. And it makes the equity work feel manageable, because I think a lot of people tap out of the work because they feel like it's too big, that they can't solve anything. But when you check in with yourself and you check in with others, it feels a lot more manageable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It always starts with awareness of self, because then that influences how we interact with others. So thank you for that nugget and for all the gems that you dropped today. It's been such a pleasure, Leroy, to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Tami. It was a true pleasure.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Equity Hour. You can find a link to the book Wake plus Leroy's website in the show notes. Until next time, thanks. This wraps up another episode of the Equity Hour podcast with me, your host, Dr. Tami Dean. Make sure to check out the show notes for any resources, links, and next steps from today's episode. Head on over to Instagram and give us a follow at Dragonfly Rising LLC for more tips, resources, and opportunities to connect. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, intent is not enough. Action is necessary. How will you use your voice today?